Now, I'd like to welcome a man who needs no introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyway. He is a Professor Emeritus of Political Science at the University of Western Ontario in Canada. He's a former columnist for the London Free Press and the Toronto Sun, and has contributed to various publications like the National Review and the Middle East Forum. He is an author, a speaker, an activist, and a man who has been much maligned by the encroaching cloud of mainstream censorship, which affects all of us. He has received numerous awards and accolades for his expertise in various fields. He's a Muslim, he's an immigrant, and a staunch advocate for free speech and free expression. It is my honor to introduce my friend and our PPC candidate in London North Centre, Professor Salim Mansur.
Hello and good evening, my friends. It's great to be here. Here this evening, we were to meet and listen to a conversation between Dave Rubin, the well-regarded host of a show in America on YouTube videos, and Maxime Bernier, our much loved leader of the People's Party of Canada. It was arranged as a follow-up to an earlier conversation between the two that aroused immense public interest in both our countries, Canada and the United States. We simply assume in our Canada we could gather openly and engage in any conversation we wish to have without contemplating that what we take for granted in our day-to-day lives, in one of the oldest democracies in the world, would stir a nest of hornets, of gnats, and worse, in our midst to stop us from doing what generations of Canadians have done in peace and in harmony. So here we meet at Mohawk College in Hamilton, Ontario, not simply to attend a conversation between Dave Rubin and Maxime Bernier, not simply to show our resolve that we Canadians, and we will not demean ourselves now or ever stoop to the diversity crowd in labeling with prefixes of color and gender and ethnicity who we are as Canadians. For we are Canadian, one and all, pledged to a country true north, strong and free. We will not be intimidated. We will not be coerced, threatened with violence not to do what a God-given and constitutionally protected right to do, but also to stand on guard for our much-loved Canada, the dominion of peace, order, and good government from sea to shining sea. Here, we are met for what was scheduled to be a joyful event of sharing and exploring and learning about issues that bring us together across Canada under Maxime's leadership, into a test of where we are headed as a country, a test of our democracy, a test of who we are as a people, and whether, as Canadians, we are truly worthy to protect the legacy bequeathed to us by Sir John A. Macdonald and Sir Wilfrid Laurier. So, my friends, we meet this evening and go forward from here. Upon us is the added burden of being Canada's defenders of freedom of speech. We take this burden. We take this burden proudly and with quiet determination, as Canadians have done before us. And so, we are resolved as the progeny of those Canadians who stood their ground at Vimy Ridge, who stormed the beaches in Dieppe and Normandy, who fought and died in defending freedom and saving Europe twice from the forces of totalitarianism in the last century. We resolve that we in the PPC will not be silenced by smears or intimidation or threats of violence in protecting free speech for all Canadians.
Yeah.
Note, my friends, that the establishment parties and the leaders in our parliament, the Liberals, the Conservatives, the New Democrats, and the Greens are missing. Their silence in defending free speech in Canada rings painfully loud across our land, and Canadians can now, without any ambiguity, distinguish that apart from Maxime and the PPC and common, hard-working, law-abiding, tax-paying citizens of our great country, the Canadian elite in politics, in business, in the media, in the academia, have gone to bed with those who seek to wreck our basic rights while pandering to the globalists and the Islamists with a borderless, one world, UN-contrived agenda. But why is this so, my friends? Why is this so? The answer is not complicated. The struggle for freedom, or between the right to be free as an individual, as a people, on the one hand, and to abridge or constrict freedom, or coerce people and deny the right to be free, on the other hand, is as old as the story of Cain and Abel, or the flight of the Hebrews led by Moses from the oppression of the pharaohs of ancient Egypt. My friends, it is quite significant that we meet this evening on Rosh Hashanah in the Jewish calendar, the day that commemorates the Lord's creation of our world. It is fitting that on this holy evening of Rosh Hashanah, we commit ourselves once again to keep secure our free speech as never before. This commitment of ours is also not complicated to explain. Maxime understands well what Liu Xiaobo, the late prisoner of conscience in communist China and the 2010 Nobel Peace Prize laureate, observed, that freedom of speech is the mother of all freedoms. If free speech is abridged and constrained and whittled down, then all of our other freedoms are consequently shriveled and contracted. Maxime also understands what the other great Nobel laureate in literature, Elias Canetti, who survived the Third Reich, wrote, that the origin of freedom lies in breathing. Maxime and we, the PPC, will not stop breathing. Nor allow anyone to coerce us not to breathe. We will breathe. We will hold secure our freedom. So I'm here addressing my remarks to you, my fellow Canadians, and especially to those who are in your 30s or younger. It is very likely your fundamental value is personal freedom. Freedom of speech, freedom of belief, freedom of movement, freedom to explore and innovate, freedom from government of any sort that tell you what you're allowed to think or think about and what you're not allowed to do. Freedom is fundamental for growth. Freedom is to be alive, and freedom is God's gift to each one of us. God gave us free will to be free and not be submissive as serfs or slaves to anyone. To love freely and not to be coerced into submission and fake love out of fear of anyone. Sadly today, if you look at the policies and practices of the present Liberal government and the main opposition party, the Conservative, the New Democrats, and the Green, our freedoms are being eroded on the basis of political correctness. This is how it works. First, one of the parties introduces a non-binding motion, such as Motion 103 on Islamophobia, that sounds like it is protecting a perceived persecuted group. Then this non-binding motion on resolution is given teeth through government funding to support the very same lobbyists and NGOs who initially came up with the idea of the motion. Then the academics join in and argue that if you want to disagree with any or all of this and lecture at a university or college such as this, you have to pay an exorbitant security fee for privately sponsored events, as you may be attacked verbally or physically by those who might disagree with you. I have experienced this personally, as have others, such as Jordan Peterson of the University of Toronto. The sponsors had to double or quadruple the security payment close to the last minute before the event in which I spoke, and escort me after the event to the subway for fear of an attack. My friends, is this freedom of speech? No. Is this where our country has been heading of late? Is this right, that in the natural course of disagreements, when individuals who refuse to bend to political correctness are smeared as racists and bigots? Such were and still remain the modus operandi of governments in communist China, Cuba, Iran, Turkey, the Arab Middle East, Russia, the former Soviet Union, North Korea, etc. And that this is the direction in which we are headed unless we firmly defend our freedoms before we are dispossessed of them. And of course, I am not telling you anything new by relating the fact that the present Liberal government of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, with little or no opposition, decided to subsidize the already largely pro-government media to the tune of nearly $600 million. Do you think for a moment that they will subsidize their critics? Hardly, my friends. Let me tell you bluntly, the People's Party of Canada under Maxime is the only party in the country that wants to increase, not decrease, your personal freedom. Maxime Bernier is the only leader and member of Parliament adamantly opposed to any curtailment of our freedoms. I will conclude with a hymn or song, a prayer, composed by modern India's greatest poet, Rabindranath Tagore. He was the first Asian in 1913 to be awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature. The great Irish poet William Butler Yeats, also a Nobel laureate, hailed Tagore as the embodiment of the great ancient sages of the East in his time. Here is the hymn in English translation. When the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow and domestic walls, where words come out from the depth of truth, where the tireless striving stretches its arm towards perfection, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sand of dead habit, where the mind is led forward by thee into ever-widening thought and action, into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake. Shalom, salam, peace, and God bless Canada.